If you haven't seen it, here it comes. In the NBA, Warriors forward Draymond Green ejected from last night's ultimate loss to the Suns after receiving a flagrant 2 for that swing and elbow to the head of Yusuf Nurkic. The ejection is Green's third of the season, his third in 31 days. He now awaits league office review for the possibility of suspension. Here he was.
As you know, I'm not one to apologize for things I meant to do, but I do apologize to you, sir, because I didn't intend to hit him. I sell calls with my arms. I don't fall or to sell a call. I'm not a flopper. So I was just selling the call because he was grabbing me and pulling my hip back. So I spun away, and unfortunately, I hit him.
What's going on with him? I don't know. Personally, I feel like that brother needed help. I'm glad he not try to choke me, but at the same time, it had nothing to do with basketball, man. Like, I'm just out there trying to play basketball, they're swinging.
All right, so Les, you should need a reminder. This was Draymond's third ejection in the last 31 days. Overall, he's now been ejected 18 times in his career. You'll recall 4 weeks ago, he was ejected after putting Rudy Gobert in a headlock. He was suspended 5 games for that. This was his 6th game back from that suspension. Overnight, our Richard Jefferson had this reaction.
Dre, what are you doing, man? You're too important. You're too good. This is getting to a space, man, where like you're hurting the game. This is bad for the game of basketball. What you are doing is bad for the game of basketball. And you are good for the game of basketball. But what you're doing, my brother, is bad for the game.
All right, so this, again, happened overnight. So we are rounding everybody up. Thank you to Brian Windhorst for getting up early with us this morning. And Jay Williams, as we speak, is on a train on his way here and will jump in as soon as he makes it. Windy, we see it again last night. And obviously, Draymond, a repeat offender, if you will, when it comes to this sort of thing. What is the expectation for how the league will react?
Yeah, well, it's obviously going to be multiple games. I mean, what he's asking for is the benefit of the doubt. But Greeny, the benefit of the doubt for Draymond Green left town literally years ago. And so what's extremely disappointing here is that he knows that he is on a very, very tight leash with this. The last 2 times he's been suspended, and just think about that statement. The last 2 times he's been suspended, Joe Dumars has said, that the discipline czar in the NBA has said that his suspension is magnified because of his past behavior. So every time he steps out on the court, he knows that anything that he does is going to be magnified. So his suspension for this will be magnified. But that's not even really what my main reaction to this is. Because we've seen Draymond do this for years. This same act that he was, trying to sell a call was the same thing he said about Steven Adams like 7-8 years ago when he kicked him in the groin. What really is super upsetting for the Warriors is that they are at an absolute crucial point in their season, in their history. Guys, this is a $400 million payroll. Did you hear what I just said? $400 million. They are right at the edge here of this going either way. Bob Myers is gone. Steve Kerr is in the last year of his contract. Klay Thompson is in the last year of his contract. In this game last night, Steve Kerr pulled the ripcord on something. He benched Andrew Wiggins, Klay Thompson, and Kevon Looney down the stretch of this game. He didn't start Wiggins and Looney in the second half. He's going with his young guys. He's trying to stitch this season together, to save it, to save this dynasty together. They're playing an important game against the Suns where Kevin Durant is not playing. In Beal's first game back, they had this game. And it falls apart in the end of the game with Draymond gone because they need him so bad. All of this on the line, and as you just said, 3rd ejection in 1 month. Considering everything, more than this, the replay that you're going to see of this 35 times in the next hour, regardless of what the suspension is, whether it's 4 games, 5, 9, 12, 8, whatever it is, it's that Draymond Green is messing up this season that is so expensive and so valuable to this organization.
And look, I mean, that is also a tale as old as time, right? This is a guy who got suspended during an NBA Finals, and practically every person recognizes that the Warriors would have won that championship that year had that not happened. Having just said that, let's go back to the discipline piece of this. When Joe Dumars and at the end of the day, Adam Silver in the league office announced only a 5-game suspension, whatever it was, 3 weeks ago, after the incident with Rudy Gobert. I think the overriding reaction that we heard from most people was that seemed light. It seemed like less than one might have expected. Here was that moment again, Draymond with the arm around the throat of Rudy Gobert and just would not let go. I think there were a lot of people, candidly myself included, who were surprised that the suspension was only 5 games. Now here we are 6 games upon his return, and something like this happens again. If I'm waking up this morning and I'm Joe Dumars or Adam Silver, I feel as though I've been made a bit of a fool of here. So if I were to ask you to speculate about what sort of a suspension we might be looking at, how would you do so?
Well, the thing about it is, Greeny, we're kind of in unprecedented territory. We really haven't seen this sort of situation with Joe Dumars in this chair or with Adam Silver. You know, if this was just taken by itself, this is a flagrant foul penalty too. This is a situation that if it were another player, they would look at potentially for a 1-game suspension. If they thought was super excessive, maybe 2. So you think about that. You also think about the Draymond magnifier, which I guess is what I'm going to call it. So I would say maybe they would double that. I would think that if it was just a standalone situation, you'd maybe looking at 4-ish games. But the question is, do they want to send this message? You know, the last 2 times that they've suspended him, I mean, it's so crazy that you have this long list now. Joe Dumars has scolded him in the release. He has specifically said, and remember that suspension in the playoffs last year when he stepped on Sabonis and all these incidents, it's unbelievable. I have to have a file. That was sort of a controversial suspension, and Dumars basically said, I did it because of your past history. And when they went to 5 games, he said, I did it because of your past history. So I'm kind of out of my depth here in trying to guess what might happen because we're out of our depth with dealing with this kind of behavior.
It's not just the process. It's one guy. He can't get himself right. That's the issue.
Yeah, again, this was his 6th game back after the 5-game suspension. Kmart, do you have a reaction?
I just love Jeff saying the phrase vigilante justice. But think about the reaction, post-game reaction. He says, well, at least he didn't strangle me. Like, at least he didn't choke me. Like, that's where we're at.
Right.
That, to me, rises to, I get my union boss over here. I
y'all
get it,
get all
Domonique.
dramatic.
But when you
Jeff get red, his neck get all red, he get all worked up at one time. Relax.
But, Dominique, you said an errant slap. That was not errant.
Okay, an intentional slap.
Yeah.
Okay, it's fine. I agree with you, but my point is you're trying to make punishments in anticipation of a repeat of the Malice in the Palace. That is not how you run a fair and equitable justice process. That's all
I'm just saying, and I'll 1 second. Take all that away. Malice in the Palace, Burfict, all these other things. Just look at Draymond Green. Like, the man just got suspended.
That's why I chose Ron Artest as the example, because he's also someone with a history. You can't just start changing stuff. Ron Artest had a history. He elbowed Harden, gave him a concussion, and he got 7 games. So no one's throwing out them big numbers that Joe was throwing in the meeting. So I'm fighting this.
I'm not saying
20 games.
I think 20 is too much.
Right now.
I'm not with Jeff on 20.
I will be very surprised if he's not suspended at least 10 games. I will be very surprised if he's not. Look, at the end of the day, I've been watching the game 50 years. You can talk about errant all you want. I've seen guys try to sell calls for a long time. They don't usually hit a guy in the head that hard with their elbow. There's a lot more than that going on here. Hawk, welcome to the program.
Hey,
what is your reaction to this? And then we'll get to the football.
I mean, my biggest thing, and you talk about the context with Ron Artest, but even the context given this with the previous suspensions in such a short span of time, and no, it's not football where you're hurting players because you're launching at their heads with helmets. But with the context of the sport, it is the equivalent in the game of basketball. And the problem is exactly what you said, Jeff, is that you are isolating yourself from people who are standing up for you. Because
That's right.
The NFLPA didn't want it. What Vontaze Burfict was going on, I was his teammate. Other players in the league were scared to play against him, and as well as the league. And so he had nobody standing on his side. Draymond, unfortunately, is putting himself in that same scenario.
Adam Silver and how they go about doing this and his relationship with the NBA, like, I think 5 games was way too low to begin with the choking out of Rudy Gobert.
I thought it was indefensible. I thought there was no need for that in basketball. This is a non-basketball related move.
Yeah.
You're not selling a foul by spinning and slapping somebody with an open or closed fist. You're not doing that.
Here again, for those of you who don't recall or hadn't seen it, this was the incident a month ago with Rudy Gobert. He was suspended 5 games for that, as Jay just mentioned. Many of us, myself included, were surprised it was only 5 games. Again, last night was his 6th game back. And I will say again, Jay, to the other point that you were making, I've been watching the game 50 years. I've seen a lot of people sell a lot of calls. It does not result in that. It does not result in someone swinging as wildly as he does in that moment. Whether it was intentional or not, it was most certainly, at minimum, reckless.
Rennie, as a former player, if you want to square up with me. Don't hit me with a cheap shot. Square up with me, man. But I've been seeing a lot of cheap shots. And the last thing I will call for, I really think Joe Dumars needs to recuse himself. I think this needs to go all the way up to Adam Silver. Because I think the 5-game penalty, it's been too light. Nobody set a firm example with Draymond by saying this is not acceptable behavior in the league on national TV when there's been nothing, no need, no physical reaction to even get it to that place in the first place.
Wendy, get in here.
Yeah, so it is. I agree with Jay that the post-game press conference was not helpful. I do not think he's got a future as a defense attorney. Saying that it was bad luck, that's a tough thing to say, that it was bad luck that he made contact. If this was a standalone situation and this was just player A, this would be a flagrant 2 foul. The league would look at it for a suspension for 1 or 2 games, probably 1. The Draymond multiplier, as I am coining it, because that's what Joe Dumars has basically done the last 2 suspensions. In a vacuum, you might be looking probably about 5 games. What I can't predict is what punitive action they may take. I don't know what Joe Dumars has said to Draymond after the last suspension, if this was the last straw or whatever. But I will go back to more than this actual act is how he is hurting the Warriors. They are 2-5 this year in games where he has been ejected or suspended. They are 3 games below 500. They are in 11th place. They have a $400 million payroll. Everybody knows this could be the last dance. And whether he's suspended for 5 games or 12 or whatever, he's hurting the team bad.
There are a lot of tentacles, if you will, to the story. Now, Domonique said earlier that you were uncomfortable to some degree. I'll remind everyone that Nick was the president of the NFLPA, and you had a high-ranking role at the NBA Players Association as well, didn't you?
Back in the day, I was the chief operating officer.
Chief operating officer of the NBA union as well. What is your reaction?
I would like to drain this situation of the emotion. Because I think what happens in situations like this is we all get angry and upset and emotional, and then we provide cover for the league to set new precedent. And that new precedent is what future players will have to live by. And the problem here is we all can get behind this. This is what happened to us in football a number of times. We can get behind being punitive for Draymond Green. But then when we have already allowed them to say, well, you can do 20 games for a backwards hand slap, when they do it in the future to someone else, they're going to point to this precedent and we won't have a leg to stand on to say that this is too punitive. So my concern in this situation is that. And the other thing is arguing that there's amount of punishment that will address Draymond Green's behavior, I think is a mistake. Because Draymond Green has proven that there is no punishment. Losing the NBA Finals was not enough for him to start acting the way that we think that he's supposed to act. So I just know that as a player, it's important for us to defend the players. The league's responsibility is to do what's best for the league, not for the player.
I hear you. What I will say is the next player who hits someone in exactly that way, if a month ago they choked another player on the floor, if they have a history of the throwing and the kicking and the elbows and everything else, then that will be different than if it is a player. Wendy just used the term the multiplier, Domonique. I mean, that does make sense to me.
I don't have a problem with any of that, but that's why I used the example I used earlier of Ron Artest. In 2012, he elbowed James Harden, causing a concussion to James Harden. Ron Artest is the same guy with that type of reputation.
Yeah.
And Ron Artest got 7 games. So, all right, Draymond Green, maybe there is some time value of money to now he gets 8 games. But once we start talking about 15 to 20,
can I say something
that's scary.
Jay, get in.
About Ron?
Yeah.
Because I've known Ron my whole life. When things happen like Ron always seemed remorseful in his post-game presser. So after the chokeout of Rudy Gobert, one of the things that Draymond Green said, the consensus among all of us is that I'm going to be me no matter what. That's never going to change.
Yeah.
So like when I hear non-remorsive types of articulation after incidents like this, and then I hear another example, it makes me think that you aren't getting the message. It's not resonating with
Agreed.
you. And I get with you on what the example is, but after a while, like if you're a repeated offender, when do you draw a firm line, Neek?
I know.
Even
I'm
from the
with you.
player's side. I'm with you.
So
and I want to represent all the players.
My point is that there is no amount of punishment that is going to curtail Draymond Green's behavior. We've learned that. Like I've mentioned earlier, they lost the finals in part because he couldn't control his actions.
agree.
He punched his teammate. Like we choked somebody last week. There is no amount of punishment that's going to change Draymond Green's behavior. So if you want to do something about Draymond Green, thinking or using the argument that we got to teach Draymond Green a lesson, I think that's a mistake because he told you and his behavior tells you that he ain't going to change.
Jeff Saturday, I can see is sort of chomping. Coming, get one.
Jeff just want to
me
fight.
and the Dookie, we're on the same side right now.
The Carolina guy. What is your reaction
I
to
couldn't
all?
disagree with Fox more. I mean, listen, I understand that you want to try to protect a player. At some point, the player's behavior has decided for itself. There's there's very little protection you can offer him. He has literally struck his teammate in the face. So all of these, so you're saying the punitive part won't change him. So what would change him? Because at some point, this is going to become, it's going to explode because a player is not going to tolerate it
My
anymore.
point is, I'm not protecting the player. I'm protecting the process.
I agree.
And once you start breaking the process for certain incidences, then you are ceding an amount of power to the business that you will regret.
I understand the concern, but my point is, if 3 suspensions in 31 days doesn't get something more than 8 games because Ron Artest got 7 in 2012.
I'm not the leader of the NBA Players Union, but I just would like them to make sure that they know that what the decision that they are making. You are not making a decision only to suspend Draymond Green. You are making a decision to cede some level of power. If you go 15 to 20 games without fighting it, you are then saying that a swing slap in the face can get you 15.
Hold on, wait, Jeff. We're talking about 2 different things.
Yeah.
If the league sets the punishment for 15 to 20 games, the PA will probably appeal.
Yeah, they got to fight it.
Right? They're going to fight it.
Sure.
That's going to happen, right? So I hear what you're saying on the PA side, but the league and their demands are something different.
Let me ask you this.
Quick final word, go.
Let me ask you this. So if from the suspension process, you say he was suspended 3 times, the last 2 times in 6 days. If this happens again, our precedent will be 15 games. How many players you think would go, hey man, I disagree with that?
I don't know.
Not many, bro.
No, nobody
Not
in this situation.
Yeah, that's my point. I don't think you're setting a precedent because you're doing that.
Next time it happens,
if someone happens with 3 times in 31 days.